Now that is how you rebuild an offensive line. The Chicago Bears trade for Joe Thuney gives them a bona fide stud up front and makes Ryan Poles' path through free agency and the NFL draft a lot easier.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1, and you can follow the podcast at Locked On Bears on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On the show today, we go through the Chicago Bears trade for Joe Thuney, the Pro Bowl offensive lineman from the Kansas City Chiefs. We'll look at just how strong of an offensive lineman he is and how good of a trade this is for the Bears, how he fits into this team moving forward. But we'll also look at what his trade, along with Jonah Jackson's trade, opens up for the Bears this offseason. And it really streamlines this process for Ryan Poles as he goes into free agency and the NFL draft. And then we'll wrap up kind of looking at what's next and what's left from a salary cap standpoint. A lot of money going to Jonah Jackson, a decent amount of money going to Joe Thuney as well. It takes a big chunk out of the Bears' salary cap. They still have some money left, but how much can they go out and spend on another pass rusher or another offensive lineman or some of the other needs this team has to fill? Well, it kind of depends, and we'll kind of go through what that looks like here moving forward. But first and foremost, Joe Thuney is a no questions asked, bona fide, great offensive lineman. It's pretty hard to find any sort of flaw whatsoever about Joe Thuney other than maybe his age. I mean, he's 32. He'll turn 33 in November, but that's pretty much it. He has been one of the most solid, reliable offensive linemen in the league his entire career. He has made the Pro Bowl in each of the last 3 seasons and has really done everything the Kansas City Chiefs had needed from him. And the Bears got him for a future 4th-round pick. That's a steal of a deal, especially given where he is from a salary cap standpoint. His current contract will only cost the Chicago Bears $16 million against the cap this season because the Chiefs had to eat some of his money in order to trade him. So the Bears are paying, right now, they're paying Thuney less than Jonah Jackson on this offensive line for a far superior player up front. And that to me is what makes this such a valuable deal for this team, because even though he's on the wrong side of 30 and approaching 33, he is Mr. Reliable, not only in terms of, the actual on-field production, but also just being able to stay healthy and be dependable for all of these snaps throughout his career. You look, since he came to the league with the Patriots in 2016, he's played almost 10,000 snaps over his career. He's only had 2 seasons under 1,000 snaps in his career. And really, he's only missed a handful of games over the years. One of those was in 2022 with the Chiefs. He missed a couple of games. But otherwise, he has really been on the field, Mr. Reliable, always out there for his team. You add on top of that how consistent he's been in pass protection. He hasn't allowed more than 2 sacks in a season since 2017, consistently allowing fewer than 20 hurries and fewer than 30 total pressures across his season. He has been every bit what his reputation suggests, and he's probably a better run blocker than he is a pass protector at this stage of his career, and yet he's still very strong in both those areas and really showing no signs of slowing down at this point. For the Chiefs, he had been their left guard. They had some injuries and had to bounce him out to left tackle, and he played left tackle at a really high level. He has spent time at center in the past in some brief fill-in situations. He's even played some snaps at right tackle. He can do it all. He can do it all at a pretty high level, but at certainly at an elite level at that left guard position. And he was essentially elite at that left tackle position as well, although it's definitely not his natural spot. His arms are a little bit on the shorter side, but it got the Chiefs to the Super Bowl with him at left tackle and didn't necessarily miss a beat up front. That was far from the problem on their offensive line. In Chicago, it gets you really excited about having him and Jackson in here as Jonah Jackson, as veteran, solid players that you've seen play at a high level before in the NFL. And him especially being someone who we've seen it more recently and doesn't carry the same sort of injury question marks that Jonah Jackson does. But maybe the most valuable aspect for Thuney here is just from a leadership standpoint. This is a guy who has been in nothing but winning locker rooms. He has 4 Super Bowl rings between the Patriots and the Chiefs here. He's going to step in and set the tone for that group that I think was missing last season without a true, real natural leader that filled in that role. Like Thuney can step in and be that from day one. I'm fully expecting that sometime in the next couple of days or the next couple of weeks, maybe there's not a super urgency to it, that the Bears will work out some sort of contract extension with Joe Thuney because they gave up a future 4th-round pick for him in the last year of his contract. I think there's a feeling like you'd like to lock him in for a couple more seasons. And also he's a little bit underpaid at $16 million this year. So I think you can finagle a way here to pay him a little bit more, lock him in for a little bit longer, but also give yourself a lot of financial flexibility in there so that if the age leads to a play drop-off, maybe not this year, but in the next season or two, or if, as he gets older, he's just not as durable, like you can give yourself some way out of the contract while also paying him the type of money that he earns as such a high-quality offensive lineman and leader and someone who you just want to have heavily involved in your locker room, in your team, in your offense. Similar to Jonah Jackson, he also comes with a lot less risk than some of the other free agents you might have wanted to go out and sign at guard because you again have familiarity with the player and this Bears coaching staff because you go back to when Eric Bieniemy was the Chiefs offensive coordinator for 2 seasons coaching Joe Thuney there. He knows how Joe Thuney is in the locker room, how he carries himself off the field, how he takes care of his body in the off season, and all the different things that you don't normally get to know about free agents brought into your team. Ryan Poles was also still in Kansas City the year they brought Joe Thuney into KC. So there's a lot of familiarity that the Bears have with Thuney that they wouldn't have with an outside free agent that helps mitigate or at least reduce some of that risk that you would have from signing someone like Will Freeze from the Colts or Mekhi Becton from the Eagles, who you might watch on tape and see are good players and would be good fit for your scheme on paper. But sometimes you sign a free agent like Nate Davis and it turns out they weren't that good of a fit because you just didn't know exactly how they were going to mesh with your coaches and with your locker room. That's not going to be the case with Thuney or with Jonah Jackson because of the familiarity these players have with coaches already on the Bears staff or with Ryan Poles in the case of Thuney coming from the Chiefs. The part about these moves that I think has flown under the radar a little bit that really I think is the smart move from Poles is how these players' respective positional versatility opens up so many more options or makes the path easier for Ryan Poles to go into free agency and the NFL draft and let it come to him as opposed to him needing to be desperate and going and getting the guy that he just has to have no matter what. Like now you can sit back, relax, and play this smart because of what these two players allow you to do. So we'll kind of go through what this could look like for the Bears offensive line with these guys potentially lining up in a few different spots next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by our friends at Chewy. You've probably heard of Chewy.com. They really do have everything you need to keep your pet happy and healthy. Whether you're shopping for food, treats, or even now pet healthcare, Chewy makes it fast, easy, and affordable. With over 100,000 products from all of your favorite brands, Chewy has the food and treats and toys and bed and grooming products you need. And it's not just for dogs and cats either. They've got supplies for birds, fish, reptiles, and small pets too. You might not know, Chewy also makes it easy to manage your pet's health with prescriptions, telehealth vet visits, and even in-person vet clinics rolling out nationwide. Their auto ship feature is also a game changer where you can set up automatic deliveries for food, treats, or any essentials so you never run out. Chewy has everything you need to keep your pet happy and healthy. Right now, you can save $20 on your first order and get free shipping by going to chewy.com or clicking the link in our description. That's $20 off your first order with free shipping by clicking our link. Minimum purchase required, new customers only. Terms and conditions apply. See site for complete details. With Joe Thuney added in the mix along with Jonah Jackson in the last 2 days, it's easy right away to fill out your Bears depth chart at home, right, and pencil in Joe Thuney starting left guard, and because that's where he mostly played in Kansas City. Most of his career has been on the left side. And then, then you're going to pencil in Jonah Jackson on the right side because he's played both right and left guard, even though the majority of that has also been on the left side. And boom, Bears got their 2 guards locked in with these 2 veteran trades. All you need is a center, and then boom, your offensive line is set. And that could very well be the case, and maybe that's the ideal scenario, right? You sign a center, and you've got these guys in their ideal positions. But I don't think Ryan Poles is going to be quick to lock those guys into those spots. I think one of the understated rationales behind these 2 trades is that both of these players have starting experience at multiple positions on the offensive line, so that then you can go into free agency in the draft feeling like you don't have to specifically address one position. Maybe ideally, you want to go out and sign a free agent center and leave both of these 2 guys at guard. That would be great, but the trade makes it so that you don't have to. That if you go into free agency and say Drew Dahlman of the Atlanta Falcons signs somewhere else because some team just pays him more money or he just prefers to play for some other team. Maybe a former coach of his is coaching on some other coaching staff that he would rather go play for. Like, there's plenty of reasons why a free agent might choose a team other than the Chicago Bears beyond just the money aspect of it. And so, then if you don't land Drew Dahlman, is there another free agent center that you really like? I mean, maybe I wouldn't mind Ryan Kelly from the Colts, but you can see a path here where maybe you get to free agency and the center market doesn't develop the way you want it to. It doesn't play out in a way that's super favorable for the Chicago Bears. Well, then you've got someone in Jonah Jackson who started at center for the Rams last season, earlier in his career, also played some center for Ben Johnson on the Detroit Lions. Joe Thuney's played some center as well, but I think more likely you could play Jonah Jackson at center then if you can't get one you like in free agency, and maybe there's a guard in free agency that you're able to sign instead. Someone like Kevin Zeitler from the Detroit Lions, or Brandon Scherf from the Jaguars, or we already mentioned Will Freeze from the Colts, or Mekhi Becton from the Eagles. Like, maybe the free agent market plays out and center doesn't work out for you, but there's a guard there, and lo and behold, one of the guards you just traded for can play center, and you'll be fine. Because at the end of the day, the goal for the Bears is and always will be to get the 5 best offensive linemen in your starting lineup, regardless of what position they're going to line up at. And so whether that's putting Jonah Jackson at guard or center, or putting Joe Thuney at left tackle or left guard, when you start to play this ahead into the NFL draft, right? If you have the opportunity to draft a really good guard, maybe even in the first round, but oh no, you've already got Thuney and Jonah Jackson, and maybe you sign a center. Well, lucky you could bump Thuney to left tackle, put a first-round pick in at guard, and maybe that's your 5 best offensive linemen. No disrespect to Braxton Jones, but a first-round pick and Joe Thuney is probably the better combination there on the left side. It gives you options of where you'd like to move these guys around. I think you can see the similar thing happening where if in the draft there's a really good left tackle you want to take in the first round, then boom, you can still take that player and move Braxton Jones to the bench as well. Like, because you can move these different guys around, there is a lot of different options there. Like, you can start to piece it together and say, okay, if you miss out on a center, you can get a free agent guard and have your offensive line be Braxton Jones at left tackle, Thuney at left guard, Jonah Jackson at center, a free agent at right guard, and then Darnell Wright at right tackle. Or if there's a guard you really like in this draft, and your best 5 then is Thuney and a rookie guard on the left side, Dahlman at center in free agency, and then Jackson on the right side, that's great. Or the rookie left tackle in the first round, and then you can still go Thuney, Dahlman, Jackson, right across the rest of the line. Like, what this does is gives Ryan Poles the flexibility so that he doesn't have to go into free agency saying, I have to sign a center. He doesn't go into free agency saying, I have to sign a guard. He doesn't go into the NFL draft saying, I have to draft a center. I have to draft a guard, because Jonah Jackson can play guard or center. Joe Thuney can play tackle or guard. So now you can let free agency come to you. You can let the draft come to you. You don't have to go after one guy and say, if I don't get this guy, I'm screwed because this is the one hole I need to fill on my team. You can have preferences. And ideally, yeah, you go after Drew Dalman of the Falcons, you fill that center hole, then you go in the draft, you can take whatever you want. You can take a tackle, you can take a guard, you can move them around however you see fit. But you don't have to. And that's such a nice flexibility that Ryan Poles has created for himself in this process. I'm sure he goes into this with a plan saying, yeah, most likely Thuney and Jackson are going to play guard. But he knows as a backup plan, he could bump Jackson into center if he can't find a better center elsewhere. Or if he can find another guard elsewhere, he can bump Thuney to left tackle. And it just gives him so much more flexibility to be smart and I want to say cautious, but like wise in free agency and the draft, to not overpay for a free agent, to not reach for an offensive lineman in the draft because, oh no, you needed to go out and get a center and you didn't get a center. Now you don't have a center option. So you got to get the guy like Jackson can be that. Thuney can be that left tackle. Like it just opens up so many opportunities for you to truly get the best 5 offensive linemen on the field. Whether Braxton Jones is one of that 5, we'll see. He's also coming off of an injury and won't be ready for OTAs and mandatory minicamp. And we'll see if he's ready for training camp or not. Like the Bears are going to need to have options here in case Braxton Jones' injury lingers longer than they might need it to be here. And so you have to try and figure out, okay, what's my best 5? Is that it's obviously going to include Darnell Wright, Joe Thuney, and Jonah Jackson. And then if you can sign a free agent center, then that's going to be one of your best 5 for sure. And then, or if you end up signing a free agent guard instead, that's going to be one of your best 5 for sure. And then it's a question of, does a rookie rise to the level of one of your 5 best offensive linemen? If that's a first round tackle like Will Campbell or Kelvin Banks or Armand Membo, like if they're better than Braxton Jones, then you need to get your best 5 on the field some way or some way or other. Or if you get a guard in the second round, like Gray Zabel from North Dakota State or Donovan Jackson from Ohio State or Marcus Mbow from Purdue, like whatever it looks like, if that rookie is a better guard than Braxton Jones is a tackle, like you have to ask yourself, what's the best combination? Jones at left tackle and Thuney at left guard, or Thuney at left tackle and the rookie at left guard? Get your best 5 on the field and kind of or get your 5 best offensive linemen and figure out later exactly where everyone is going to slot in. That's what I like so much about the combination of these 2 trades. Oh, and by the way, like Jonah Jackson has an injury history, so you're going to need better depth on this offensive line. And if you put Braxton Jones on the bench, great. Now you've got a really good backup tackle who can move back and forth. You could still also draft another guard or another center and have good backups. Like I like the idea of building this offensive line from the top down so it pushes guys down the depth chart instead of what Ryan Poles had been doing in the past, where they've been sort of adding competition and trying to push guys up the depth chart in terms of who's going to win in this battle at center, push guys up the depth chart, and then you don't really end up having anything decent at the top. I want to take talent at the top, push guys down the depth chart, and then improve your backups that way. If that ends up being moving Braxton Jones to the bench, so be it, but make the best offensive line possible. I don't think it's the end of the world if Braxton Jones is one of your starting offensive line, and if you sign Drew Dalman and you go Jones, Thuney, Dalman, and then Jonah Jackson and Darnell Wright, that's a great offensive line too. I'm just glad to see the Bears prioritizing that position. What that's meant, though, is significant financial investment. In addition to giving up now 2 draft picks in the trades, you're giving up, $33 million against the salary cap right now for Thuney and Jonah Jackson. That's a lot of money to invest in there as well. The Bears still have some salary cap space left, but it doesn't go quite as far when you've already dumped $30 million into 2 offensive linemen. So we'll take a look at what the Bears can and can't still afford from here when it comes to the other needs on this roster: a center, a new starting defensive end, and some other key positions on both sides of the ball. Next on Locked On Bears. The Bears do have close to $50 million in salary cap space left, even after trading for Jonah Jackson and Joe Thuney. It's possible they may end up tinkering with Jonah Jackson's contract a little bit to create a little bit more space right away in year one. We'll see exactly how that plays out. And a Joe Thuney contract extension could also change some of the salary numbers there for him as well. But $50 million, well, more like closer to 45, right in that $45 to $50 million range, depending on some certain projections there, is a lot of money. And yet also, free agent dollars can go fast. And that's where I kind of want to caution us a little bit on not going too crazy here, right? So these two contracts, Jackson and Thuney, are significant contracts. Like this is the kind of money we were expecting the Bears to pay a free agent like Will Freeze or a free agent like Drew Dahlman, right? We're in this sort of $15, $16, $17 million a year range. So these two trades have essentially been like two big free agent signings. And when we went into this offseason, we were thinking the Bears could maybe afford 2 or 3 big free agent signings. Well, you've sort of kind of made 2 signings worth of investment in these 2 offensive linemen. And now there's only so much money left to go around. So when when people start going through offseason plans, it's like, okay, now sign Drew Dahlman and sign Khalil Mack and go get this wide receiver and go get this running back or whatever. It's like, well, so let's slow down a little bit here on what exactly the Bears can and can't afford. Because yes, the salary cap is, people say the salary cap is made up. You can always tweak the numbers and push money into the future to make room for more free agent signings, but that's not always the most long-term financially responsible thing to do. And I think the way we need to think about this is actually to start at the bottom and then work your way up to see what's left for big contracts, because there's certain players the Bears just have to sign to fill out the rest of their 53-man roster. Like you don't have to sign Khalil Mack as a pass rusher, but like you're going to need to fill some of your backup roles that are just empty right now. And those players don't cost much, but they're not free. And they do add up when we're talking about, maybe 20 different players in terms of, you're going to need to re-sign some backup cornerbacks, some backup linebackers, some backup defensive linemen, some backup offensive linemen, and you're going to need to figure out your tight end depth as well. Like all of a sudden, all of those players each start to slowly chip away at your salary cap space, but collectively add up to be a lot of money. Like there's still a lot this Bears team has to do this offseason. You need to you need to bring in a long snapper or re-sign one. You need to re-sign or bring in a kick returner, a third string running back, depth at corner, depth at linebacker, depth on the offensive line, backups on the defensive line, a number 2 tight end, a number 3 wide receiver, and then the starting defensive end and center. And obviously the starters are the bigger priority there. But when you're doing the salary cap calculations, you can't just go through and spend all your money on the starting center and defensive end and not also leave money for everything else they have in terms of these less important needs that do still count against your salary cap. So like, even if we oversimplify this, which is absolutely not how this works math-wise, but let's just bear with me here for a second here. Let's say you spend $1 million on a long snapper, which is, again, for fudging numbers here, $1 million on a kick returner, $1 million on a third string running back, $1 million each on 2 more backup cornerbacks, because you only got, you only have a few guys under contract right now. Say they get to 5 cornerbacks, so you're signing 2 more to back you up. So $2 more million on them. You need to sign probably 2 more linebackers because you only have 3 under contract. So 2 more, we'll say all these players are only $1 million deals, which is an oversimplification, but okay. And then you're going to need another backup guard and maybe another backup tackle there. That all of a sudden we've just talked about 9 players that are all, oversimplified $1 million each. That's $9 million off your salary cap space. Okay. So you go from, say, $50 million down to $40 million. And then, okay, you're going to need another backup defensive tackle and another rotational defensive end, in addition to the starter that we'll get to, but like a true second string player. So these are not going to cost $1 million. These are going to be, $3 to $5 million players. So let's say between the 2 of them, that's $8 million off the board to get, maybe a $3 million tackle and a $5 million end to be rotational backups in there with Gervon Dexter and with Zach Pickens, and then on the edge with Austin Booker and with Dominique Robinson. Okay, so that's another $8 million. Now we're up to 17 we spent on those guys. And then a number 2 tight end and a number 3 wide receiver you're definitely going to need. You're also going to need a third tight end, which is another $1 million off the board. Say a number 2 tight end costs you $2 or $3 million, and a number 3 wide receiver costs you $2 or $3 million. And then so that's another $5 million off the board. And all of a sudden, we're were $20 million in on just signing the backups and the depth that you need to fill out your 53-man roster. So that $20 million comes out of your $50 million in salary cap space and leaves us with $30 million with a starting center and a starting defensive end still needed. But you also have to leave some money to sign your free agent, your NFL draft picks. So that's going to be another $15 million or so you take out of there. And then you're also going to need some money to leave as emergency cap space in case during the season you have an injury and need to sign a free agent. So maybe you need to then take $5 million left for that. And so all of a sudden we've taken that $50 million and we've chunked it down and you got like $10 or $12 million left to get a starting center and a starting defensive end. Then it becomes a lot harder to sign Drew Dalman and Khalil Mack, right? That's the salary cap math I kind of want to get at here. Sure, you could sign them to a super backloaded deal, lower the year one cap hits, and push all that money into the future, and you can always find a way to create more salary cap space. You could restructure the contract of Montez Sweat. There's a bunch of different things you could do if you really felt like you had to create extra salary cap space. You can always make more room. But the cap space they have goes quickly with all the other different backups and needs the Bears still have to have here. There's a lot of players that are going to be free agents. And some of those are still guys you're going to re-sign, but everyone you re-sign takes a little chunk on your salary cap, and every little backup that you want to pay more than veteran minimum is another chunk out of your salary cap. And all of a sudden, if you spend $15 million on Drew Dalman and $17 million on Khalil Mack, or whatever those numbers is, that's $32 million out of your $50 million of cap space. That leaves you with $18 million left. And if your NFL draft class is going to take 10 of that, then that leaves you $8 million left to get a number 3 receiver, a number 2 tight end, backup defensive lineman, backup offensive lineman, backup linebackers, backup cornerbacks, backup running backs, a kick returner, and a long snapper. Like, there's not enough money as the cap space stands right now to get big expensive center and big expensive defensive end. Again, you could restructure contracts, but is it that important that you get the top center and the top defensive end on the market? Or could you get Drew Dalman and then a lesser defensive end and be okay with that? Someone like Chase Young that could cost a little bit less, or Chauncey Golston from the Cowboys, or whoever it might be. It's just not it's not Josh Sweat. It's not the top guy in the market, but it's somebody who's just a little bit cheaper. Knowing that you can go into the NFL draft and get a pass rusher, you can go in the NFL draft and add more depth at these positions as well. I guess it's not that you have to sign all of these guys in free agency, but you just want to make sure you don't have any of these glaring holes that you have to address in the NFL draft. And there are a lot of little holes to fill that cost a lot of money too. So hopefully that helps put into context a little bit more that the Bears have a lot of cap space, but they have a lot of things to use that cap space on, and you can't just go and sign all the big free agents you want just because it feels like you have a lot of cap space, especially because you've already used such a big chunk of that cap space on Jonah Jackson and Joe Thuney. That's $30 million that disappeared in those two players. When you were working with $80 million, there was more room to go sign Khalil Mack and Drew Dalman and a guard, but now you've used $30 million on these two trades, plus you've got all these other bills to pay in terms of other backups you need to sign, and money doesn't go as far as you think it does in the NFL unless you want to really leverage some of your future salary cap space to clear up space now. But is now the time to leverage the future, or are we still sort of building up towards that and trying to be long-term financially flexible and responsible? That's for Ryan Poles to decide. But hey, in the meantime, we can celebrate a great trade for Joe Thuney and a very clear investment in this Bears offensive line. Back-to-back days with trades. We'll see if we wake up to another trade Thursday morning as this podcast comes out. If they do, we'll break it down for you right here on Locked On Bears. So make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, because that's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network. That's your team every day. So if you're looking for a second listen, you can check out any of your other favorite teams' Locked On Sports podcasts. Locked On NBA, Locked On NHL, MLB, and college sports. All of your favorite teams are covered by a Locked On podcast. So go check out one of those for your second listen. Coming back tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Bears and another opportunity to bear down.